American leadership is what holds the world together. American alliances is what keep us, America, safe. American values are what make us a partner that other nations want to work with. To put all that at risk, if we walk away from Ukraine, if we turn our backs on Israel, it's just not worth it. That's why tomorrow I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine.
President Joe Biden made his case for more war funding from Congress during his Oval Office address just last night. Now he's asking Congress, with all its dysfunction in the House, to pass legislation appropriating a whopping $106 billion for both Israel and Ukraine. There are other elements to that legislation, other funding efforts, which we'll get into in just a moment. But first, let's get to his explanation as to why he believes Americans should want to do this. This is what he said in his speech.
I know these conflicts can seem far away. And it's natural to ask, why does this matter to America? So let me share with you why making sure Israel and Ukraine succeed is vital for America's national security. You know, history has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death and more destruction. They keep going, and the cost and the threats to America and the world keep rising. So if we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine. Putin's already threatened to remind Poland that their Western land was a gift from Russia. One of his top advisors, a former president of Russia, has called Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania Russia's Baltic provinces. These are all NATO allies. For 75 years, NATO has kept peace in Europe and has been the cornerstone of American security.
So, Brett, before I get to a breakdown of where all this money would go if Congress ends up passing this legislation, I'm curious what you think about his explanation there, because, previously, I would have kind of rolled my eyes at that whole notion of America having to be the international cop, and without us, it's going to be a disaster with some of the superpowers taking on smaller countries and causing all this chaos. I do think that there's some truth to it, especially what it would message to China, for example, if we were to just allow Russia to do whatever it wanted to do in annexing giant portions of Ukraine. But what are your thoughts?
So it is, so that's what his framing is, we've heard it, right? When that's the eye roll thing, but it is less than it has been in the past. American positioning there, see withdrawal from Iraq-ish and withdrawal from Afghanistan. So Biden, more than previous presidents, has pulled out of this, but he is a guy from that era. And so he's like, NATO's got to be NATO. We have to keep that strong. Russia's still Russia. And it is, I think, foolish to deny that with America leaving that area, and also after America has completely, there was no time at which Saddam Hussein, well, there was a time, but like recently, there was no time at which Saddam Hussein was a pal. But once you do that to Iraq, you've got another power vacuum in the Middle East, right? And so when we do that, there are other actors that are interested in enriching their countries through the kinds of behavior that America gets to engage in, because America is the one remaining superpower, so to speak. China rising, Russia trying to rise. And you've got a bunch of people jockeying for that power. You've got the whole, BRIC nations. They're trying to see what they can put together. The difference between American intervention, as we've seen around the planet, and Chinese intervention, as we've seen around the planet, is if you look at the breakdown of money that Anna's going to outline in a second, if it was a Chinese itemization, there'd be a lot less weapons involved and a lot more roads and bridges and infrastructure that, it's on loan right now. And if you don't make the payments, that's fine. It will be ours. But in the meantime, you guys do get to develop your economy. And don't you forget who did that for you, as opposed to America, whose typical foreign policy has been to go in and been like, all right, and Britain before them, who's going to do stuff that's going to enrich me and my corporations? Okay, we'll just make that person in charge now.
That's such a great point, Brett. It's such a great point, because what's noticeable about China's foreign policy is how they basically get other nations on its side by investing in their infrastructure and helping them out. The United States has mostly relied on the International Monetary Fund model, if that, and that usually leads to these massive loans to help struggling countries, but then they're forced to engage in all sorts of austerity that causes, a lack of stability in those nations and a lot of rage by the civilian populations. But I promise I'm going to break down how this is all going to be appropriated should it pass. But I do think it's important to go to one more video, because in this clip, you'll hear Biden emphasizing the need to fund Israel's security, and as its government basically readies for a ground invasion into Gaza. Let's watch.
In Israel, we must make sure that they have what they need to protect their people today and always. The security package I'm sending to Congress and asking Congress to do is an unprecedented commitment to Israel's security that will sharpen Israel's qualitative military edge, which we've committed to, the qualitative military edge. We're going to make sure Iron Dome continues to guard the skies over Israel. We're going to make sure other hostile actors in the region know that Israel is stronger than ever and prevent this conflict from spreading.
All right, so he made it very clear we want to help bolster Israel's military, which of course we've been bolstering for quite some time now. I'll get into those numbers. But when you hear a figure as large as $106 billion, some of the reporting made it seem like most of that money is going to go to Israel. That's actually not the case. Let's take a look at the breakdown here. And I want to warn you all, this is just the ask from the Biden administration. It doesn't mean that this is going to be the end result. Now, $61.4 billion would actually go to the Ukrainian military and also to their economic assistance. 14.3 billion would go to the Israeli military. 14 billion would go toward immigration enforcement. 9.15 billion would be humanitarian assistance. I would like to see that broken down even further. You've got $4 billion on countering China's influence in developing countries and Indo-Pacific. Obviously, I want more details on that. What does that exactly entail? And $4 billion is not a small amount of money, and I want to know where it's going to be funneled to. And 3.4 billion to the submarine industrial base. So there's a lot more money going to Ukraine than Israel. And I understand why that's the case in terms of the US's security concerns, right? Our national security. I think that a lot more of the attention is focused on controlling Russia and basically defeating Russia in this war against Ukraine. But the 14.3 billion for the Israeli military would be on top of what we're already providing the Israeli government on a yearly basis. So Jeremy Sharp from the Congressional Research Service had put out a report earlier this year in March, kind of breaking down how much money the United States has given Israel over the years. Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of US foreign assistance since World War II. To date, the US has provided Israel $158 billion in bilateral assistance and missile defense funding. At present, almost all US bilateral aid to Israel is in the form of military assistance. From 1971 to 2007, Israel also received significant economic assistance. And if you take a look at this chart, it breaks down the numbers even further. These are the numbers dating back to 1946. So the total amount, you could see it at the bottom right-hand side, $158,665,000. But we've also provided, the bulk of that money to missile defense, but there's also a lot of economic help that was provided to Israel as well. So even with all of that help, unfortunately, Hamas was still able to break through Gaza's barriers and cause the absolute devastation that they did on October 7th. And I just think that these types of incidents will continue to happen as long as, the security strategies that the Israeli government has engaged in clearly did not work. You have like the Gaza Strip. There's a blockade of the Gaza Strip. Everything there is controlled by the Israeli government. There was simmering anger and rage, and I think it boiled over to some extent. And there's got to be a different strategy in place. That's not going to be an easy thing to accomplish, but there needs to be diplomacy. I'm not saying with Hamas, obviously, but there needs to be a way for Palestinians to live lives of dignity, Palestinian civilians. So you can have a two-state solution, and you can have, two countries living side by side without these like insane flare-ups in war and violence.
Yeah, any solution I am for that ends the violence and needless ensuing death. So yeah, when it comes down to it, I think my official position on this whole thing is, Benjamin Netanyahu's got to go, Hamas got to go, two-state solution. If someone's want to draw up anything other than that, put it on the table, bring it to bear, and we can talk it through. But like, if Israel needs to fortify the border so that there's no invasion into it, fine. But I just don't, and a ceasefire like yesterday. I think those are the things that need to happen. And I think we need to get back to, and people who are like, right now we need to, get to work on this. Fine, if you can get to that solution. My gut is it's going to be months and months from now, after time has passed after this. And it just goes back into the kind of thing that you remember as part of the history of the Israel-Palestine, part of the history book, right? And that's where I'm at with it. And when it comes to the, Iron Dome does work. That's the thing, that the money and the investment, it does work. And there are attacks all the time, and you see Iron Dome happening. You can see video of rockets getting shot. So it's, attempted crimes are still crimes. If they don't work, it goes to further underscore that Israel is more powerful than the parts, the Gaza and the West Bank. Like, and the last part of my solution is the settlements in the West Bank need to end. That's not good.
Absolutely. And there needs to be consequences for settlers who, commit violent acts against Palestinian civilians in the West Bank. Absolutely. And look, part of my problem with the Biden administration is what's currently transpiring within the State Department. For instance, there are certain words and phrases that employees at the State Department have been advised not to use. Senior State Department officials have privately discouraged the agency from using 3 specific phrases in public statements: de-escalation / ceasefire, end to violence / bloodshed, and restoring calm. They're not allowed to use those phrases or words. And that is not a good sign. We should be advocating for peace. The State Department shouldn't be advocating to basically silence anyone who wants to advocate for peace. But we'll get to some details on State Department officials who are not happy with what the current strategy or foreign policy has been in regard to that war in Gaza. And there are even some congressional staffers who have signed letters to members of Congress urging them to call for a ceasefire. But, Biden wants some money for humanitarian aid. He wants to, present the US government as being kind and working hard to fight on behalf of Palestinian civilians. It's difficult to do that when you simultaneously provide cover for literal war crimes that are being carried out right now in the Gaza Strip by the IDF. So they don't want to call that out. Israel is an ally of the United States, and for whatever reason, there's just this unwillingness by the government, not by the people in the US. I'm seeing more and more people speak out against it, but the government just kind of pretending like what's happening in Gaza isn't really happening, cutting people off from food and water and fuel, and refusing to allow humanitarian aid in while engaging in a relentless bombing campaign that's killed far, far more civilians than Hamas fighters is a huge problem and should be acknowledged by the Biden administration, but he won't do it.
Right. There's a reason for that, and it's up to everybody to decide whether it's a good reason or not. But the reason for that is Israel is America's ally in these situations. There's stuff you do as an ally that you just have to like keep up in terms of appearances. You have to, hopefully behind the scenes, they're actively finding ways to just end the madness in right now. But I mean, that's the explanation, is you don't after this be like, actually, no, take them. And you don't, and not that they would say that, and not that they would get anywhere close to saying we're not on Israel's side anymore, but the way that this plays out and the positioning and the posturing in that region, at least that's an explanation for why they do it. They're like, no, if you look at the history books, like this is another point that I like to make to everybody, like as a half Jew, grew up in Los Angeles, went to Catholic schools, like whatever. The concept of and you're like, why are the Israelis, certain Israelis like this? The concept of total annihilation from the planet of all your people is not a concept for Jews. It's a reality. And if you look at the timeline, Israel exists in the wake of that attempt getting millions and millions. And you can go anywhere in the world and you can ask the tour guide, like, where's the place where they tried to kill Jews here? And they'll be like, there, and there.
Yeah.
That doesn't excuse.
Look, I know, I totally get it.
And it's not for you. It's just like generally this, when I see the discourse, it's so easy to say like everybody's doing this, but people are asking like, they can't be that crazy, right? I hope that in the, as everyone gets worked up, at least you just factor that into your appraisal of the situation for most people.
Well, I think you're making a really good point, and I think it's because of my ancestral history that I understand, like I understand the trauma, and I understand the fears, and also that's, I think, part of the reason why. And the other reason is I think it's just being a moral person and caring about innocent people's lives. That like when the Hamas terror attacks happened, I didn't feel the need to minimize them, not even for a second, right? So these types of war crimes, this type of brutality toward innocent civilians, it's disgusting. It's disgusting when Hamas carries it out. It's disgusting when the Israeli government carries it out. And it's just important to have clarity on that, but also understanding in regard to the trauma that, multiple generations have lived through because of what happened to Jewish people in the Holocaust, because of how they were persecuted around the world for a very long time. So I understand that wholeheartedly.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us. Become a Young Turk.